On today's Sunday, Yud Aleph, Iyur. This week we have Pesach Sheni, Mitzvah, Wednesday Pesach Sheni, and a week from today is a Lag B'Omer parade. So we're not going to be here next Sunday because there's going to be a parade, and the parades are very special. B'chlal, the Rebbe is here, by the parades especially, the Rebbe is here. So there's an Indian just to be in Eastern Parkway when the parade is happening. We'll start again from the two dots, but we're going to read. It's page 10, the two dots, about 11 lines from the bottom of the page. But today we're actually going to do more than read 3 words. Okay, the last few weeks I've been giving you explanations of words. I'm done. We're going to move now. Okay, we're going to move. We're going to learn. The explanation of the matter. And the matter, of course, is, what is a Beinani? B'Shem HaToyad? What is a Beinani? As we describe a Beinani, not in terms of his being judged, where you say, Nidan Acheruba, you judge a person after his majority, and if half his actions are good and half his actions are not good, they're called a Beinani. But rather, what the Alter Rebbe calls Mehus Madreges, Mailas Madreges. When you're talking about Mehus Madreges and Mailas Madreges, a Beinani is somebody who has no Avedis, and they brought a number of Rayas, even from Gemara, but he has a Yetzer Hara. So to understand what the Beinani is, and of course, indirectly also, you're also going to explain what a Tzaddik is. And what a Rashi is, says the Rebbe, Yuvan, Apim, Mashakosaf, Reb Chaim Vital Zal. This can be understood based on what Reb Chaim Vital writes, B'Shar HaKdusha, which is a sefer of Musar Api Kabbalah, Ubeitz Chaim, Shanun Perik Beis. These writes it in his primary work of Kabbalah, Eitz Chaim, as follows. The L'kol Shisel, every Jew, Echad Tzaddik, V'echad Rasha, righteous and a sinner. Yeshtei Neshamas, there are 2 souls, and he brings the pasuk who could exceive u'neshames aniyah sisi. I've created 2 neshamas, but the Alter Rebbe right away says Yeshtei Nefoshes. They may not be the madrega of neshama. They may not be the madrega of ruach. It may be just the madrega of nefesh. So although the pasuk says neshamas could be nefoshes, right? We know that according to the Tanya, there's nefesh, ruach, neshama. Everybody has nefesh. Tzadikim have ruach, big tzadikim have neshama. So although the pasuk says neshama, it's possible that it means nefashis. You're alive, you're living. It's because there's a life force inside of you that's called a nefesh, and we all have 2 nefashis. What are the 2 nefashis? Nefesh achas, 1 nefesh. The first nefesh is mitzad klipa, comes from the side of klipa. Klipa means a peel or a shell. V'sitra achara on the other side. V'hi hamislabeshes bedam ha'adam, which is revealed in the blood of the person. Lahachiyes haguf, to give life to the body. Ukidiksiva, that's written in the pasuk, ki nefesh habosar badam hi. The soul, the life force of a person is in the blood. Now I told you last week that in Perek Tes, the Alter Rebbe brings a different pasuk. The other, ki hadam hu hanefesh. Here it says, nefesh habasa badam hi, the life is in the blood. Over there he says hadam hu nefesh. The blood itself is nefesh, and the Rebbe has a ha'orah in Perek Tes. Why over there he says different than over here? And I forgot. So I can just tell you that it's there, but what the word is gedekich nicht. And now the Alter Rebbe continues. Umimena. Because we have a nefesh which is called the behema, and we've been sitting on these 3 lines for a month and a half, and we translate what nefesh abahamis means. I've told you, behema does not mean bad in the conventional sense. An animal is not evil in the Amadabar, the language of people. Why? Because an animal is a kosher animal. Doesn't have to be a treifa animal. It doesn't have to be a predatory animal that kills to eat. It can be an animal that eats grass. So an animal is not necessarily evil, but an animal is an animal. What is an animal? Number 1, the entire reality of that animal is itself. It's all an animal thinks about. The animal has no concept of anything other than itself. Number 2, animals have no interest in they're not curious. They're not interested in what's beyond their reality. They have to eat. They have to stay alive. They have to eat. And they have to procreate in that order. And that's it. Mer Gornish. They have no other interests. This is the way they live. Animals have not improved their accommodations in the last 5,000 years because they're not thinking about what's beyond. the basic definition of a person is to know what he doesn't know yet what's beyond him. Animals don't have that kind of an idea. And the third characteristic to an animal, the first one is that he's selfish. The second of all, that he has no vision, no interest, what's outside of its realm. And the third characteristic is not true of an animal begashmius necessarily, but it's certainly true of an animal beruchnius. He's always worried. And as padayet, he's constantly burdened. He never lets go. He cannot trust. Finished. His reality is the trust. His trust extends to the bowl in which you put the habe, you put the oats that it eats. And if he's a really sophisticated animal, his trust is in the farmer who's going to put the oats into the trough from which he's going to eat. But the idea that there's somebody looking after the farmer, and that ultimately that who's looking after the farmer is looking after him also does not exist, so he's always worried. So these are the animal characteristics. It's selfish, short-sighted, he's not interested in malamayla, malamata, malafadim, malacha at any level, and he worries. And the Rebbe says, Mimana boys, from this animal soul, which is not a bad guy. A chicken, a cow, a goat, a sheep is harmless. They're just animals. And by a human being, there is a nefesh that's also an animal. Not necessarily bad, but it has these limitations. And from these animal limitations comes midas rois. Comes bad character traits. Now, midas rois, the word ra-taka means evil. Schlecht. I'm trying to define the behemoth, right? The nefesh ha-bahamis of a yid is a kosher behemoth. It's a kosher animal. It's not a treif animal. But the midas, the symptoms that come from this behemoth are ra. What are they? Me'arba yeseides roim shabah. From the four evil elements, or from the four elements which an animal has, that in the case of the animal, they're evil. Okay, so let's explain it the way we explained it before. In Balabatish, Pshat, in Nigle, you can't call a creation that thinks about itself bad. It's just selfish. But one of the ideas which has been so important to us over the last few classes has been that we're learning Pnimiyus HaTeira. We're learning the Neshama of Teira. Or as I like to say it, and I said it in the earlier classes, we're learning Teira Bashamayim. The Teira that we're learning in Tanya is not Teira Lei Bashamayim. You're not learning Teira as it's brought down to earth. You're learning Teira as it is in heaven. And Teira Ba'aretz, Teira that's Lei Bashamayim, Teira on earth. You have three categories. You have the things that you have to do, things that you're not allowed to do, and then do whatever you want. In Teira Bashamayim, there's only two. It's either good or bad. It's either Sitra de Gdusha, which is bottles of the Eivish and the Shechina rest, or it's Sitra Achara, it's Klipa, or it's the other side, it's Ra. So the meaning of the word Ra here doesn't necessarily mean evil in the sense that it's going to eat somebody up. It's evil in the sense that it's not bottled to HaKadosh Baruch. And in this Nefesh HaBahamis, that's Ra, on this level, there's four Yosei, there's four elements, it's comprised of four building blocks, and from these four elements comes Midas Roy. So the way we understand this is, there's a phenomenon called Mezeg, Miziga, blend, mix, right? And of course this is very esoteric, this is very difficult to understand Balabatish, but this is the idea. Without going into Arichisen, and certainly without getting into arguments, every physical thing that exists is made up of four elements. Every physical thing that exists is made up of fire, wind, water, and earth. There is a letter from the Rebbe, a note from the Rebbe, which is now printed, and there are stories about the Yechidison that took place many years ago that I've heard from Bari Samcha, from people who don't exaggerate and make things up. That the Rebbe says that when the question became, how could Teira say there are four elements? There's over 100 elements. So the Rebbe explained that the elements of which Teira speaks are very different than the modern elements and the chemical elements, because a chemical element is complex. It's made up of parts. And the elements of Teira are much simpler. And the Rebbe writes, I saw it with Dibur, it's written in Likutei Sichos also, that every atom has four parts. And the four parts are positive and negative, matter and antimatter. I don't know what that means because I'm not a physicist, but an atom is already a shruach ma'imah. So every atom that exists, whether it's a carbon atom or it's an atom made from some other element, has 4 parts: Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afa, fire, wind, water, or earth. Nevertheless, there is a phenomenon called mezig. Mezig means mix. And I don't know exactly how we can understand it in physical terms, but in spiritual and psychological terms, we don't have such difficulty understanding. Mezig means, even though every single piece of every single human being's body is made up of all 4, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afa, there are still tendencies, there are leanings. In other words, all of us are made from the same material. We're all made from Eish, we're all made from Ruach, we're all made from Mayim, we're all made from Afa. At the same time, some people have a tchuna, have a character that's Eish-like. Some people have a tchuna that's Mayim-like. Some people have a tchuna that's Ruach-like. And some people have a tchuna that's Afa-like. In other words, somehow, even though physically we're made from the exact same material, the physical material from which we're made has a spiritual parallel, and the mezigis are different. You have Eish people, and you have Afa people, and you have Mayim people, and you have Ruach people. And from these characteristics comes Midas. And in the Nefesh HaBahamis they called it out. What's wrong with showing off? What's wrong with boasting? How terrible is it? So the tenet is because it's not Kedusha. And if it's not Kedusha, it's Klipa. So the Alter Rebbe gives examples of the various Midas Rois that come from the various elements. Meaning to say, even though each one of us is made up of all 4, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afa, from Eish comes certain Midas Rois, and if you're an Eish person, you're going to struggle with these Midas. From Ruach is going to come another set of Midas Rois, from Mayim a third set of Midas Rois, and from Afa a 4th set of Midas Rois, and each person suffers from those Midas which are more predominant in his Tchuna, based on his Meziga, based on his Mezig, based on his mix, based on his character. And he says, Hainu, number 1, Kas v'gaiva miseda Eish. Anger and haughtiness and conceit comes from the element of fire, just like fire rises. A person who has in his character this Eish characteristic of always trying to raise himself up, however you understand it, will suffer specifically from anger and from conceit, from gaiva, from arrogance, from pompousness, however you want to describe it. Kas and gaiva, anger and gaiva. Then he continues, V'taivas hatanugim miyeseid amay. And the desire for pleasure comes from the element of water. A person whose tchuna, whose mezeg, is predominantly mayim, is a Baal Taiva. He's a quiet guy, doesn't make a lot of noise. He's not very arrogant, but he has a sweet tooth. He loves Taivas. Because water is the source of all pleasures. So by Eish, here's a reason. You know why a person who has an Eish characteristic is going to suffer from gas on Gaiva? Because it's Negbol Amal, because fire rises. By Mayim, he also gives a reason. Why would a person be Beteva? A Baal Taiva, someone who seeks to have all kinds of pleasure, because the predominant characteristic in his nefesh is Mayim. And Mayim is the source of all Tainig. In other places in Chassidus, they add that Mayim has Teva Dvekis. Mayim is Teva of cleaving, of things attaching themselves. Water is not a very strong bond, but it does create bonds, dvekis, a connection. Then it says v'helelus, v'litzanus. Helelus means lightheartedness, frivolousness. Litzanus means, litzanus can be translated as being funny, but litzanus probably means cynicism. Someone who's cynical, someone who laughs, but not in a healthy way. Perhaps not. Vehispidus, perhaps. Somebody who boasts. And someone who loves to shoot a breeze, to talk about anything. Is miyasei ruach. Comes from the element of what? Air. Now the Alter Rebbe doesn't say why, but you could look at it in 2 ways. Number 1, doesn't say why because he doesn't know. Number 2, it doesn't say why because it's so obvious. Yeah? A wind person blows wind. And frivolousness, and making, the Chazal speak very, very severely about a letz. You know, the Gemara says, Arba kites einim reim, one of them is a kat leitzin. There's 4 groups of people who never can see the Eibishter, and one of them is a kat leitzin. So a letz doesn't just mean a comic. You know, funny people are not necessarily bad people. Letz has a connotation where they laugh at everything, that they have no ability to do anything but laugh. Va'atzlus, you say the offer, laziness and sadness and melancholy and heaviness come from the element of earth. And again, the Alter Rebbe doesn't explain why, and why doesn't Alter Rebbe explain why? You could say because he doesn't know, or you could say because it's so obvious. It's so obvious the relationship between offer and atzlus is obvious. Okay, so what's the constant in all of these midas rois? All of these emotions, all of these emotional expressions, really have good and bad. Right? The Alter Rebbe speaks in Tanya about, you have this in Sfarim also, sometimes the place, chas v'shalom, a person should be actually angry. God forbid. If a person that Rambam writes about anger, that it's a midah that you take to an extreme. Right? The Rambam holds in Hilchos Deis, as we all know, that a person should walk in the center. The kava emtsoi, the center. By certain midas that Rambam writes, you have to take an extreme. You can't be in the middle of taking an extreme. One of the midas about which the Rambam writes you have to take an extreme is anger. Anger is a terrible midah. It's a terrible, terrible midah, and it's a terribly destructive midah. People who suffer from anger know this, and people who suffer from angry people know this as well. Anger is a gefelach midah. So to be actually angry, but the idea for a person demonstrating anger, showing anger as a protest, has a place. Has a place. Everything has a place. There's very, very few things that you say is never correct. Most things that are not good need a very specific environment where they're considered appropriate. So there's a room for anger. There's room for gaiva also. Right, Alter Rebbe had a chassid, it's a davar yedua, the Mordechai Lepler was his name. He achieved the madrega of beinani by being a Baal Gaiva. I was recently talking to my students and Beis Rivka about it. And it was so shocking to them. I said, how come in the olden days people were such big chassidim? The Yain first could live in small shtetl. That's why. The Alter Rebbe had one chassid who lived in a big city, and the Alter Rebbe's chassidim couldn't understand how he could be a beinani. And when they would ask him, he would say, Gaiva, that's all. Arrogance. I'm better than the people around me. I can't lower myself to their madrega. This is approximately what he said. And the Alter Rebbe himself said about this chassid, the Mordechai Lepler, that his derech and avoid is vayigba libe b'darkei Hashem. This place for everything. I heard once from a very wise Hasidic Yid a moedendik expression. It says in the Mishnah, as panim legeyanim. As panim means a chutzpahnik goes to Gehenim. Ubaishes panim legan Eden. A person who's bashful should go to Gan Eden. Does anybody know how that Mishnah finishes? I'll give you a quarter. After this Mishnah finishes. It's in Pirkei Avos, near the end of Pirkei. As panim legeyanim, ubeishes panim legan Eden, yiratzim ufanach. Okay. So the push of the Taich is, as panim, a chutzpahnik goes to Gehenim. Chutzpah is a midara. Beishis panim, a shameful person, a bashful person, a shy person goes to Gan Eden. If you're chutzpahnik, you can be in Gan Eden, in Gehenim, and survive as a Jew. You're bashful and shy, stay in Gan Eden. To be in the real world, to be a Yid, sometimes you have to have chutzpah, sometimes you have to have kas, sometimes you have to have gaiva. These midas have opportunities, have circumstances, every single one of these midas, that they're appropriate. When you do a mitzvah, zech keli vanveyu, that's tiferet, that's his spoilus. Everything, every one of these inyanim has a time and a place. But it has to be managed. And when it's a teva, it's a tevara. You see? When it's your nature, it's not good. When it's exercised by choice, when it's managed, when it's focused, it's a good thing. But if you leave it to your nature to be the basis for how you express your midas, this is already not good. And by the way, you should see, you'll discover, as we learn Tanya, the word teva is going to come up a lot. We're going to be talking about the word teva a lot, because in the Tanya the word teva is used often. The word teva means a fixed characteristic. Something that's part of who you are, that you're stuck with. Every nature, by definition, has good and bad. If a person's nature is to be kind, that's a wonderful thing. But the kindness in a person's nature is not by his own effort. It's not by his own work. It's not by his own thought. It's not by his own choice. So that kindness can also have a terrible downside for reasons that we cannot go into at the moment. For example, to be kind to somebody, that being kind to that person is actually an act of cruelty. So the key here is the word teva. When a person's anger in his nature, it's a terrible midah. It's a terrible, terrible midah. And where anger comes from, the Chazal say that anger is like Avodah Zarah. The roots of anger have to be traced and studied and analyzed. And Gaiva, the same thing. Is there a room for Gaiva and Avodah Hashem? There's an enormous place. Gaiva is a very great asset. We talk a whole day about Anivis and Bittul, and we have to understand that there's a context for all of these things. To succeed in this world as a Yid and as a Chassid, you have to be about Gaiva. So how do you reconcile Gaiva with Bittul? It's a fabrengen, it's a shmuas, it's a discussion. But the reality is that Gaiva has a healthy place in a person, yeah? So what does the Alter Rebbe mean when he speaks about Gaiva? And of course the answer is when it's your teva. How is Gaiva the teva of a person? What does it mean that the person's nature is to be haughty, to be arrogant? So of course it's a tunas hanefesh, it's a character trait, it's a personality type. But the psychological reality of Gaiva is that you're actually hiding something. It's very inside out. What does Gaiva mean? Gaiva means I create walls between me and somebody else. I am better than that person. What makes me better than that person? What makes me better than that person? I'm better than that person. And I create a wall that does not allow that pretense to be changed. If a person is very great and they think highly of themselves, that's good. As long as they don't think more highly of themselves than they actually are. If a person is not great and they think highly of themselves, all they have is their thinking highly. So their thinking highly has to be protected. Because behind their thinking highly is nothing, is an empty suit. So they have to preserve, they have to sustain a sheker. That's Gaiva. And that's why Gaiva very frequently shows itself in kas, in anger, because you're hiding something. You're protecting something. It's a midah and it's a teva. In other words, when a person exercises these midas based on their nature as opposed to based on a choice because of a circumstance, it's a midah. So kas is anger. How do you explain kas? How do you explain anger? Where does anger come from? What is the root and the source of anger? There's a situation. Let's see if we can explain anger. Anger means there's a situation, and you think that you're in charge of that situation, and the situation does not turn out as you think it should turn out based on your control of the situation. Now what happens if you're in control? We're all in control of situations. The Rebbe once told Rabbi Sachs from England, you don't find yourself in situations. You put yourself in situations. But the way the reality of the world is, you put yourself in situations and then the situations change. They're fluid. All kinds of things happen. You make one plan, the Eibush has a different plan, and b'derech klal, when you have one idea and the Eibush has a different idea, he wins every time. It's maybe a surprise and a shock, but it's Metzias Advarim. The Eibush tut was will. So you have a plan, the Eibush has a different plan. So when you're in control of your environment and there's a change, what's supposed to happen? You're supposed to let your string be a little bit loose and adapt. But if you cannot let your string be a little bit loose, and your string is very, very tight, and the situation changes, so you feel like you're losing control over your situation, and when you feel like you're losing control over your situation, you react. Is that a legitimate explanation of anger? I think it's quite, I don't know if it's the only definition of anger, but it's one way of seeing anger. Anger is when a person feels like he has no control over a situation. Now, first of all, usually there's no reason to get angry. Why? Because you have more control than you think. Use your mind instead of your heart and you won't get angry. Oftentimes people get angry is because they don't have the patience and they don't have the deliberateness, they don't have the poise, they don't have the calm. They say, okay, react. There's a situation. It didn't work out as you planned. Now, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to plot? How's that helpful? Adapt. Try to do something different to make the situation work. But then, of course, there's another factor. And the other factor is, hey, it's not your world. You're not supposed to be in control. You're in control to a degree. You're in control in certain aspects. This world belongs to the Eibishter. Why does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya, from a Chazal, right? It's a Zohar. It's no Gemara, by the way. It's a Zohar. And this Zohar is found in Rambam. How did a Zohar end up in Rambam if the Rambam never saw Zohar? Something is Mr. The Rambam writes, Kol HaKayes Kil Eved Aved Zara, and there's no such Gemara, and there's no such Chazal. The source of it's a Zohar. How did the Zohar end up in Rambam if the Rambam never saw the Zohar? Leave it to the experts. That's something, what I'm telling you is factual. So why is anger considered Avodah Zarah? Because the idea that we're in control of our lives, has two levels of chesaron. The first level of chesaron is when you're in control of your life and your life doesn't work out the way you plan it, you have to adapt. And your inability to adapt, your reaction, your emotional expression of anger means you feel like you're losing control of your world. It's not the way it is. You have to just be soft. You have to be rach kakona, not kosher keres. Now people who are angry know how difficult this is. People who are not angry don't understand how difficult this is. It's not poshut. But this is the metzius. When something happens that you didn't plan, when something happens that's not in the parameters of your sense of control, of your little piece of the world, so you're supposed to do something about it instead of react. And the second dimension of anger is, it's not your world b'chlal. We're not supposed to be in charge of the world. We're supposed to be doing our best within the parameters of what the Eibishter planned for us. So kas is a midah, if it's a teva. When a person acts angry under certain conditions, the Rabbi brings in Tanya, there's a place in that same Megillah HaKedesh, the Rabbi talks about anger, the Rabbi suggests under certain conditions a person should display anger. Not be angry inside, but display anger as a protest against something which is being done wrong, and so on. But when kas is a midah, it's a midah muguna b'yeseh. Anger is a terrible midah. Anyway, so that's kas, and that's gaiva. And they both come from eish, which means everybody has them, because eish is a part of the makeup of every person. And some people have a predominance of eish, so by then that midah is going to be extra strong. Yeah? Then what do you have next? Taivas. What are taivas? Taivas. How do you translate the word taiva in English and not get uncomfortable? Taiva means a desire. Taiva means lust. Taiva means want. My translation for the word taiva is weakness. Weakness, chalishus. Weakness. We have weaknesses. We have weaknesses. Weaknesses. And perhaps part of the reason we connect taivas to mayim is because water is soft. Ava is soft. It's not hard. Taiva means weakness. Schwachkeit. Now, in the civilization in which we live, in the modern world, what they call in the social science community consumerisms. We're consumers. We're people who enjoy life and not just survive. What's wrong with having weaknesses? They have other words for it. What's wrong with having weaknesses? So we can debate what's wrong with having weaknesses. But everybody also agrees that some weaknesses are no good. And every weakness that's excessive is certainly no good. But that's what taiva is. Taiva is weakness. There's something that I want, and I don't choose it. It self-chooses. That's how you would translate a taiva. I want something. Is it good or bad? You have to choose it. You have to choose it. You have to make a decision to go after this particular food, drink, clothing, whatever it is. A person needs all kinds of material things, right? One of the struggles of life is there's no way to live on this earth and not eat. There's no way to live on this earth and not sleep and not drink and not dress and not drive a car and not live in a home. You have to have gashmias. It's the way it is. So what's taiva? Taiva is, in plain English, where something outside of me controls me rather than I control the thing. That's taiva. Taiva means weakness. Weakness. You allow yourself to be managed by something outside of yourself. Is there room for taiva? Perhaps. But when a taiva is a teva, it's klipa. When a taiva means to say, when I find myself in a situation where various different things leave me without a balabatishkeit over myself, it's a midah. If a person always chose everything that they did, then there would not be a bal taiva. But if a person frequently doesn't have the ability to choose because the chosen owns him, that is a bal taiva. I was sitting with my baruch the other day, and one of the boys, we have whatever, long story, complicated story, one of the boys mentioned smartphones. So I said to him, a smartphone never, ever, ever did an Aveda. Now I'm not saying people should walk around with smartphones, don't misunderstand. But I'm saying the smartphone didn't do the Aveda, we do the Aveda. Why? Because when you own a smartphone, a very, very powerful tool. Very powerful tools could be used for very good. Very powerful tools could be very bad. It's a question, who's a balabas? Are you a balabas over your phone, or is your phone a balabas over you? It's a fantastic thing. It's mamash a gavaldik kazach. We were kids growing up, we used to use the telephone as a mushroom. You're trying to get somebody's attention. And they're not responding. They're busy. Call them on the phone, and they jump up to see who it is. It's emes. It's true in the cell phones also. That phone beeps, that phone rings, you gotta see. What do you have to see? I'm trying to talk to you, but you're busy. You're busy. So I want to get your attention, so I go to the next room, and I call you. Oh, now you look to see who it is. Why? Because you have a weakness. What's the weakness? The psychologist will say the weakness is, I don't want to miss anything. That's taiva. Weakness. Teva hamayim, a person, tchunas hamayim, frequently is vulnerable and subject to weakness. Weakness means to say that their lives are governed by the things around themselves than their ability to govern themselves. It's a midah. But it's only a midah if you don't have any control. What's next? Hoilulus. Hoilulus means frivolousness. Holokapten, you would say in the old country. Frivolousness. Chassidus talks so much about joy. Chassidus talks so much about joy. What's the difference between being joyous and being frivolous? What's the difference between being joyous and being frivolous? It's very difficult to distinguish. I probably told this to you last time we learned Tanya, and the time before. I had a kid in yeshiva. It goes back many, many years. Today he's the father of children. Who was a hoylel. He wasn't the world's greatest student. He wasn't the most disciplined. He was a freilich, a lebedik in neshama. And in those days, I was much more threatened by freilich, a lebedik in neshamas than I am today. And he would walk through the dorm, the hallway in yeshiva, actually run, screaming at the top of his voice, schreien. And he would jump up and hit the ceiling. He was a teenager. He was acting like a teenager, come out of it. And he would sometimes forget that when classes are going on, he shouldn't do it. So we got into this whole, so his argument, I don't understand. You teach me a whole day about simcha, and I'm being besimcha, and you're objecting. So how am I supposed to answer it? You're the one who taught me in Tanya that I'm freilich, and now the Rebbe outlawed any kind of sadness, and here I am displaying my joy, and you're protesting. And of course, the psychological approach was, you see, simcha is okay as long as you can control it. You can't control me, so the simcha makes you nervous. So the problem isn't with me, the problem is with you. What's the tenet? It's a good kasha. It's really a good kasha. And by the way, it's probably better than being in a bad mood. Probably the truth, right? The difference between hoilulus and simcha, in a word, is that simcha is, I hate this word because it's so overused. Simcha is responsible. And hoilulus means throwing off responsibility. Simcha means we all have a life. And there's no such thing a life that doesn't have seriousness, it doesn't have burden, it doesn't have challenge. And the Torah says to a person, the Eibush says to a person, there's never a justification to not be sameach. In psychological terms, you have to always be positive about your life. It doesn't mean your life is perfect. It's not the point. Being positive about your life doesn't mean life is perfect. Being positive about your life means that your life is ultimately good. Life is good. And moreover, if you want to live life successfully, you have to have a positive sentiment. So simcha is an avodah. Simcha is a task. What's the task of simcha? That whatever our situation is today, yesterday, tomorrow, I raise myself above it and I have a certain positiveness, a certain energy about it, a certain optimism and so on. What's hilulus? I don't care. It looks the same, but it's very, very different. Hilulus is throwing off life, or separating from life, walking away from life, putting yourself in an environment where you just don't think about life, and you laugh, and you're free, and you do whatever you want. This is an animal trait. It's an animal trait because it's a teva, it's a nature. It's an animal trait because it's not coming from the person. It's coming from something which is not the person. If a person manages his hilulus, if a person is aware and responsible, and he teaches himself how, in spite of the challenges of life, or the realities of life, or the seriousness, he laughs, that's simcha taki. But when you decide that the only way to be happy is to disregard, or to ignore, or to totally throw off the responsibility of life, it's a midah ra, it's hilus. It's a way of dealing with life. What do they call it in our culture? There's words for it. A defense mechanism. Some people deal with the challenges of life by not caring. Some of them say to you, I don't care, and some actually say to themselves, I don't care. That's a midah ra. It's a midah ra. It's coming from weakness, coming from teva. It's called hilulus. And then you have litzanis. Again, does litzanis mean a comedian who makes people laugh? It's hard to say so. The word the way we use the word let's is about someone who makes jokes. The Gemara speaks very highly of people who make jokes. You know that? The Rebbe once spoke of a brengen that there was a Tanya who asked another Tanya, who has a chelik in El Mabod? There's a number of such Gemaras, and one of the answers is Hane Batche. People who made people laugh. Making people laugh is a good thing. What's a letz? I think a letz is a cynic. Oplachen. A letz is somebody who laughs to take away the significance and the meaning of things. You know, when you find yourself in a tight situation, in a responsible situation, in a serious situation, there'll always be one person who feels the stress, who feels the tension of the mood, and he has to lighten it. There's a place for that also, but a letz always does it. A letz laughs at everything. He takes the seriousness out of everything. It's amidara. And again, you could say that there's room for litzanas, but when litzanas comes from teva of a person's tendency towards, in English they translate as scoffing, and laughing at everything, they're avoiding the seriousness of themselves. They're allowing teva to deflect them from experiencing their own lives. It's a teva, and it's a midara. Hispairos. What's hispairos? Hispairos means to boast, to show off, to display. Hispairos means to show yourself on the outside.
But you're excited, so you show. You're excited about something.
Excitement.
You don't get the excitement that's in you.
Fine, but the Hebrew word for excitement, maybe we have a language issue, but hispailos. Ayin lamed vov. Hispa'el means to respond. Right. Hispirus means to be boastful, means to be showy. A person's excited, they're excited. There's good excitement, there's bad excitement. A person's excited, they demonstrate that excitement. Okay, we can debate, but it's not the... Hispirus means that the only thing that matters is what you see. That's what hispirus means. Hispirus means what's on the outside is more important than what's on the inside. If a person is experiencing something and they show it on the outside, if what they're experiencing on the inside is a healthy experience, what they experience on the outside, we can discuss. Hispairos means that there's nothing on the inside. It's just on the outside. You know, and I'll give you an insight. I'll give you an insight. Which is brought in Chassidus, grade. For the record, by the way, most of what I say, I hope, is brought in Chassidus, so we're both in a very, very bad mind with the matzav. I'll give you an interesting dogma, yeah? Chassidus talks about klippus. You have in certain places about klippus. I mean, here we're talking about klippus, yeah? And there's Maimonides Chassidus, you have it in Likutei Torah, you have it in various places that talk about various different klippus. Right? For example, there's the klipa of taiva we talked about before. A person is lustful, they have a lot of desires, and they don't know how to tell themselves no. You have the klipa of kas, yeah? And you have a klipa that's called kavod. There's a klipa that's called kavod, honor. Like the Mishnah says, hakina v'hataiva v'hakavod. Hakina, kina means jealousy, taiva means lustfulness, and kavod means glory. It means honor. Now, for the people who are precise, you'll understand this. The three biggest avedas in Yiddishkeit are murder, idolatry, avodah zarah, and immorality, and adultery, and hypocrites. Yeah, avodah zarah comes from kina. I'm sorry, retzach. Murder comes from kina, from jealousy, because jealousy is the source of anger. Gili aroyis, immorality, comes from taiva, from weakness. You can't tell yourself no. And avodah zarah comes from kavod. Avodah zarah means my God has to look like something. The problem with our relationship with the Eibishter is you're relating to the Eibishter and he doesn't have an appearance. You have to make him tangible. So in Chassidus they speak about this. There's the taiva of kina, there's the klipa of kina, jealousy and anger. So midara, it's gevura of sholosh klipas of meis lagamri is kina and kas. And then there is taiva. Taiva is chesed of klipa. And that's the source of Gili Aroyes, which we had in last week's Pasha. The Torah actually calls Gili Aroyes chesed. Remember, you learn chitas. Chesedu. Because it comes from weakness. And avodah zarah is teferes. Because Avodah Zarah is a pretty face. Avodah Zarah is a thing that look good on the outside. And it's a little bit of a hisboneness, but not a lot of a hisboneness. It actually can understand. You can understand why this is. So Chassidus talk about, what is Taivas HaKavod? What's the big deal? If a person has Taivas, they can do Avedis. If a person has anger, they can hurt people and certainly do Avedis. What about a person who wants to look good? Kavod. And Chassidus connects it to the klipa of Levushim. What's wrong with wearing nice clothes? What's wrong with a person being concerned with how he appears to other people? What's the big deal? Who gets hurt? So Chassidus calls it makif of klipa. It's a klipa that doesn't really enter into it surrounds you. And Chassidus says it's very difficult to be mavader. It's very difficult to correct. You know why? Because there's no energy. The whole thing is a show. An angry person has a lot of energy. Even a Baal Taiva, a lustful person, has energy. A showy person, what is it? I want to look good on the outside. It's called kavod. And that's what his spoidus is. His spoidus is a person who needs to be seen. I've told this to you many times, that when the Friedrich Rebbe came to America in 1930, he was here. And he used to write his Rebbe's in the Chamadina a letter every single day. Every single day in Yiddish. Those letters are printed in the Beis Mashiach magazine probably 18 years ago, a very long time ago. And for some reason I've never seen them in print. No one ever published them in books, but it's a series of letters, mamish, many letters, where he's writing to the Rebbetzin about his American experience. And one of the things that's written in this collection of letters is that he says, I've come to a land where everybody is showing off. Everything is a demonstration. You're an Italian, you have a parade. You're a Irishman, you have a parade. You're Chveis Nitzvos, you have a parade. You're Puerto Rican, you have a parade. And he says, Shtel sich vor, was that a niedrige Menschen sie sind. Try to visualize what kind of lowly creatures they are. Showing off boastfulness is empty. Kas is a midah, but there's power. Taiva is a midah, there's also power. But his spoilers, and of course when the Rebbe came to America, one of the first things the Rebbe undertook, what's going to be next Sunday? A parade. What's a parade? It's his spoilers. But this is using it for Kedusha. This is Azos Lekata Halach B'nimusa, you come to America. But when you need this, when your identity is determined by what other people see about you, that's a very sad state of affairs. The idea that it's very, very important that my neighbor should like the way I look, it's what they call keeping up with the Joneses. Did ever talk about this a lot? It's a tragic distraction from what life is about. That's called hispoidus, Weisensach. My whole identity is how another person perceives me. It's interesting. I have a lot of midas reis in my personality. Despite the idea that people should like the way I look, not exactly. But there are such people. It's very important to them. It's very hard for someone who doesn't have this midah. In other words, all the midah said until now I can relate to personally. This one is a bit of a I'm joking. Don't take me too seriously, please.
Yeah, but when you go to visit someone in the hospital, they say you should dress that's right.
So there's a place for it. But when your identity is defined by your appearance, by other people perceive you, it's a very, very sad emptiness. It's a very sad emptiness. I'm simplifying it, but this is midas hayispoilus. And then at Dvarim B'Teilim. Dvarim B'Teilim means just to talk. Some people have to talk. People just love to talk. People talk. Yeah? Talk. I had a friend once told me something very wise. Someone said to me about somebody else that this person is afraid that if they stop talking, they're going to disappear. Reuven said to me about Shimon, I'm obviously being vague, yes, I heard this 35 years ago when I was a teenager, that if they stop talking, they're going to disappear. Why should a person keep talking? Talk. It's very interesting. Who gets hurt from extra words? Nobody really gets. We're not talking about Lashon Hara. We're not talking about Rechilus. We're not talking about politics. We're not talking about what Rashi described last week. Ochel Kurze B'Malka, that you're always looking to undermine and to... Some people are just... Talk a lot. Okay? It's really harmless, but it's empty. It's a midah that comes from Ruach. And I think this is the correct... If you have to explain psychologically what's wrong with this midah, what's wrong with this midah is you define yourself by hearing your own voice, by other people hearing you, as opposed to what you are, which is a midah. I'm just thinking out loud. Now, what are the last two? Atzlus and Atzlus. These two, what can I say? These are very popular midas. Of all the midas that we listed, we have about 10. We have Kas and Gaiva and Taiva. And Halus, Litzonis, Espadas, Vanabatelim, and you have 9. Atzos, the last 2, everybody can relate to. At least the majority of people can relate to. Laziness, oh, what a story what laziness is. Huh? You know, have you ever met people who aren't lazy?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, the ultimate example of this is the Rebbe. If you could do something now, or in a second from now, why should you wait a second? And for other people, if I can do something now, or in a second from now, why should I do it now? Right? Laziness. Es brennt nicht. What is the root of laziness? What is the root of laziness? What's the root of laziness? How do you explain where laziness comes from? I mean, the Alter Rebbe follows up by saying sadness. It's true. Every laziness, psychologically, is the opposite of motivation. Right? If a person is motivated, do what they have to do. If something is important, you do it. If something is very important, you do it now. If something is not so important, you push it off to later. No, what's important? What's important is that you shouldn't waste your time. If important is that you shouldn't waste your time, how could you wait for anything? Unless your time is not that important to you. Why is your time not that important to you? Because you're not that important to you. Why are you not that important to you? Because there's something wrong with how you perceive yourself. In other words, laziness is the opposite of hard work. Hard work comes from a certain drive. Every drive can have a positive, right? A person's a balgaiva. They have a lot to accomplish. They're very, very busy and they're working very hard. They never push anything off to the next second. That could also come from a bad place. But laziness comes from a person who doesn't value this minute. If you value this minute, you don't waste it. If time doesn't have a value, then you waste it. Laziness comes from sadness, really. Sadness. And psychologically, what is sadness? Sadness is a lack of energy. One of the simplest truths that you'll learn about the Chassidus is that there is no such emotion as sadness. There's an emotion as joy. There's an emotion of love. There's even an emotion of anger and hate. But there's no such emotion as sadness. Sadness is not a feeling. It's a lack of feeling. Emotion, feeling is fire. Sadness is a lack of feeling, which is why a sad person has no energy. Which is why sadness is at the root of laziness. Laziness means there's no drive, no push to do something now if I can do it in a minute from now. And the root of it is sadness, and it comes from, you say the offer. Offer is a tendency, it's a teva. Right? To use biological terms. Some people have, what do they call it in science? A tendency towards obesity. Some people have a tchunas hanefesh that they're going to be fat. Do they have to be fat? No. They can control themselves and eat the way they're supposed to and not be fat. There's a greater likelihood that they're going to eat in a way that's not going to be healthy because they have a certain gene that gives them this tchuna. The gene makes them want to eat. The gene may affect how they process food, what the pratim are. But the bottom line is, if you have a certain tendency, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be that way. When you have a certain tendency and you are that way, it's a midah. And in this case, it's atzlus and atzlus. Atzlus means laziness. It's a terrible midah, laziness. It's a terrible, terrible midah. And by the way, you know lazy people? I know lazy people. When I look in the mirror, I see a lazy man. You wouldn't think of me as a lazy person. Why? Because I work very hard. Why do I work very hard? Because I have a lot to do. But a lazy person, you see how, let me tell you how it works. Explain to your life. Not my life, your life, our life. The way it works is azoy. You have a schedule for a day. There's so many hours in the day, and you have so much to get done. And then you waste a little time. What happens when you waste a little time? You feel bad. What happens when you feel bad? Waste a little more time. Then you feel worse. Then you reach a point where you realize, if I don't do this, it's going to be a disaster. So now you're in a rush. And you're rushing. You do it wrong. You don't complete your task. You take on more than you need to. You end up not sleeping enough. So you wake up the next day, you don't have enough koyach. So it becomes a cycle. A non-lazy person is never in a rush. It's a funny thing. Lazy people are rushing. People who are not lazy are never in a rush. Why? If you use your time well, you never find yourself in a ma'amad matzah where you're chasing yourself. One of the great frustrations of life is compensating for the stupid mistakes we make. So you say, okay, I wasted a whole day, but I'm not going to get nervous. Right? I'm going to continue being calm, cool, and collected. Then you waste a second day. And a third day. The nukud is a midah. A midah means that Eibishter gave me a certain tava, and unless I fix it, this is what I'm going to be. That's what's a midah. So Alter Rebbe lists 9 midas rois, and we will stop, and we'll continue next week in Mitzvah Shem.